Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the first since that I know of, the first regional New South Wales Bioeconomy Summit. And we are delighted to be partnering on delivery of this event with Regional Growth New South Wales Development Corporation. And I would like to personally make a little shout out to Azaria and the team there, who have been incredible to work with over the last, particularly I would say over the last 2 years, and in relation to the special activation precincts and their support in terms of driving bioenergy projects across those special activation precincts. So we hope to see some fantastic announcements in the coming years in relation to those sites, and that there'll be some bioeconomy in the SAPs, which would be great. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm on at the moment, so that's the Ngunnawal people. I wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of Canberra and the city and the region. I would also like to acknowledge and welcome other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be attending today's event. In terms of just a little bit of housekeeping, for all of the attendees today. Now, we understand that today is a really long event, and we've got a lot that is jammed into it. So we are expecting people to be coming in and out of the event in relation to the sessions that are of most interest to them. The entire event will be available on Bioenergy Australia's YouTube channel and also on our website. And we actually find that we have substantially increased numbers of people that watch the event post the event, which is fantastic. So please feel free after the event to watch any sessions that you had to miss out on because you ducked out. Now, if I can ask that people have their videos turned off and on mute if they are not presenting or involved in a session. That just helps in terms of bandwidth for others, and sometimes accidentally people end up showing us what they're having for breakfast and all sorts of fun things. So if we could have that, that would be great. For the sessions, there is a moderator for each of the sessions that will be managing the question and answers at the ends of the sessions. I'm looking after this one, which I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions, which is great. So if you can type your questions into the chat section, and I will manage those questions at the end of the session. I'll also throw it open so you can raise your hand, and I can throw to you if you have a particular question. Now, initially, I was planning on presenting on global and domestic drivers for Australia's bioeconomy. That was before we had the Bioenergy Roadmap released. So given we now have, it feels like the best Christmas present I've ever had. Now we have Australia's first Bioenergy Roadmap. I felt it would be good to give that additional time to Matt, and also that there would be such a huge amount of crossover between the two in relation to what we would be talking about, because obviously in developing the Bioenergy Roadmap, a significant amount of work was done around what are the drivers domestically that will support Australia's bioeconomy, what are the international drivers that would potentially also do the same. So there would be a substantial crossover, and I thought best to hear right from Matt, and that we could have that extra time for questions. So just quickly, Bioenergy Australia, we are the industry association for Australia's future bioeconomy. Our members range from really an incredible eclectic group. So we have airlines, we have trucking companies, we have state government bodies, we have investment companies, we have developers, technology providers, fuel producers, anything and everything you could possibly imagine in this space. And the way that we seek to corral our members and work with our members is that we formed a number of alliances. So we have an alliance called the Renewable Gas Alliance. We have the Sustainable Aviation Fuels Alliance of Australia and New Zealand. We have the Cleaner Fuels Alliance. We have the Renewable Heat Alliance. We have the Circular Economy Network, the Bioenergy Investor Network, and the Government Bioenergy Network. And each of those groups are really focused on driving the agenda in those particular spaces in order to support the development of that part of Australia's future bioeconomy. So In terms of the work that we're actually producing off the back of the Bioenergy Roadmap, we have around 5 pieces of work that we've commissioned recently in order to now take the work from the Bioenergy Roadmap and to assist us in driving the economy forward. So we've recently commissioned a piece on sustainable aviation fuel. It's around bridging the price gap, which will be really interesting in terms of being able to now show what's needed to actually capitalise on the opportunity of sustainable aviation fuel. We have a number of pieces of work around renewable gas, so including digestate and how we can be supporting the development of digestate in this country in order to really monetize renewable gas projects around that additional income stream, which will be incredibly beneficial. So for anybody who's interested in knowing anything around bioenergy, around being introduced to project developers, investors, technology providers, anybody who's interested in learning a little bit more about particular projects or any additional case studies, please feel free to get in touch with us. We also have something called the Bioenergy Kickstarter, and that is a web tool. It's an online web tool that businesses can go to in order to understand what their potential bioeconomy could look like for themselves. So whether you're producing waste streams or residues, or whether you're not and you're just interested in understanding how you could engage, it has a decision tree that you can go through, and it will provide you with case studies and infographics showing you how those different pathways work. So I would like to, just before I wrap up, I would like to say a massive thank you to Matt and the team at ARENA for the incredible work that they did, as well as the consultants that worked on developing Australia's Bioenergy Roadmap. It's been a really big 2 years, and it's been, a fantastic time working with the team, and it was just such an incredibly collaborative project that really took on board such a huge amount of industry feedback and engagement, and we're delighted to have it released. So without any further ado, I will now hand over to Matt.
Great, thank you, Shahana. I'll just present this, and I can see if you just down the screen, Shahana, just give me the thumbs up if you can.
Sure.
Confirm you can see that presentation. Can you see that?
I sure can.
Great, excellent. Thank you very much. So just before I start, a couple of acknowledgements. So just to acknowledge Lisa from ARENA is on the VC as well, and Lisa's instrumental in managing our bioenergy portfolio. So Lisa, thank you. And also to acknowledge Loic. So Loic from ENIA is on the line, and Loic's hard work was very much a driver of the roadmap. So I will also note at the end that over the coming months, we'll also do a series of presentations on the roadmap, which Loic and his team and the Deloitte team will also present. But what I was going to, and one other acknowledgement, which I'll say whilst Shahana's just given me the floor, is just to thank Shahana and her team at Bioenergy Australia, including the board of the organisation that's been very supportive of ARENA's work and messaging ARENA's work, and obviously input into the roadmap. So thank you guys for your work as well. For those that aren't familiar, so ARENA is a Commonwealth Government agency. The agency was established in 2012, very much to support energy transition with a focus on renewable energy, with a focus on pre-commercial activities, which supports and then transitions technologies and business models to other organisations such as the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. Our main return on investment, which you'll see a lot of if you're happy to go onto our website, is our knowledge sharing. So the bioenergy portfolio is actually a very strongly represented knowledge sharing repository that Lisa manages. So if there's anything you can't find, I'm sure Lisa will be happy to give you a hand. A quick retrospect. So this is where ARENA has invested over its lifetime to date. So $1.8 billion. Close to $8 billion of transaction value, and importantly across the middle there, across a range of technologies. And very proudly, that bioenergy portfolio is actually one of the stronger ones across there in terms of the activities we've supported. So a very exciting and very diverse portfolio that's underpinned a lot of the activity in more recent years in Australia. So now to the roadmap, and you're right, Shahana. It's been a bit of time in the coming, but we're obviously extremely proud to have released this and had the endorsement and support of government and the industry so far as well. And when going back some time ago, and I won't say how long ago, but when we set up the roadmap, it was really out there to reset, I think, the strategic landscape for bioenergy and get I suppose, a common or concise view around what we needed to do to move the sector forward, including understanding what that potential was, and fitting in with the government's, I suppose, evolving prerogatives and priorities around emission reduction and the technologies that would play a key role. So it was a very broad-ranging piece of work, and you can see the two logos on there that were instrumental, being Eni and Deloitte. Was a great consortium for us to work with to assist in its delivery. So a bit more of a retrospect. So how did we come about the thinking and process here? So it was underpinned by extremely extensive industry consultation, which again, Bioenergy Australia very much assisted in facilitating that, and as well as some quite detailed economic modelling as well to support the numbers that have come out of it. But you can see there 9 different workshops, 40 interviews, 140 plus submissions, and again, just a very broad range of stakeholders. And the consultation workshops you can see there actually align quite closely to some of the reference groups that Shahana mentioned earlier. So again, trying to get a very broad and hopefully consistent view, which has been now reflected. So I suppose this is sort of the executive summary slide, and I'll go into this in a little bit more detail going forward. So where the roadmap found is bioenergy can play a very key role in helping to support an emission reduction story, very, very relevant to regional growth, and support other areas such as waste management and fuel security within Australia. So you can see there to the bottom left there, will have, should it take this trajectory, quite a significant impact in terms of economic growth, jobs, and a lot of those would likely be in the regional areas, supporting emission reduction, the landfill, and the fuel security story. So the roadmap, I suppose, concluded or found 4 themes that support the story going forward, that looks to bring together, as I said, industry and governments to work together to achieve some of these options. And where I'd sort of generalize it before getting into these themes is really about saying that bioenergy's position and role will really be to, I suppose, support hard to abate sectors and not look to compete with other forms of emission reduction opportunities that might be more, for example, cost competitive. And I'll touch on those in a second. So as you can see, each of those 4 themes, some of them are very much focused on technologies and sectors, and others are around how to actually build the sector and get it on that trajectory. So let me run through these in a bit of detail. So the first one, industrial renewable heat, which again is one that has got a lot of traction, a lot of discussion within industry, but hasn't necessarily reached its full potential. But this is really about utilizing bioenergy resources and conversion technologies to offset or meet industrial heat requirements. And that may be a range of feedstocks and a range of conversion technologies, but really looking to displace fossil alternatives that are used. And a number of examples exist, whether that be offsetting natural gas or LPG or coal that's used in some instances, but leveraging a waste and waste supply to support these sectors. An example, and not that image there, or it might be that image, it says Rockingham, I don't think it is, but the MSM milling project, which again has been a case study for the sector and very strongly supported by Bioenergy Australia, utilising residues to offset LPG, and that had a very significant impact in terms of the emission reduction at that facility in particular. So the second one, and one that does draw a lot of interest, is sustainable aviation fuels, and this is one that we have followed quite closely, both domestically and internationally, around the journey here. And I'm sure people are familiar that sustainable aviation fuel is a real thing, and there's been recent media reports around 100% sustainable aviation flown flights in recent periods, which is very exciting. So The certification pathways there, the technologies there, it's just needing to develop and build that sector and advance that technology to allow it to become mainstream. So obviously, this would be a very much front and center for a hard to abate sector. Things like electrification, whether it be battery storage or hydrogen, is not likely to play a role in the near term or medium term because of the energy density issues. Whereas having a complete drop-in fuel that can utilize existing infrastructure is likely to be the pathway to near-term cost reduction. So this, and for people that did see the announcement, this is an area that we will focus on going forward. So I'll pause on that one and come back to that one at the end as well. So renewable gas grid injection. So as the name suggests, the opportunity to leverage bioenergy to support emission reduction or decarbonisation of the natural gas network. That's obviously a very, as we move forward, a very key one that will require the support from an emission reduction point of view. Important to flag here that this is very much complementary with a lot of the hydrogen conversations that people are having. Both gases can be used interchangeably and converted between the two with existing technologies. But where we see this playing a role is really underpinning the next stage of emission reduction and decarbonisation for industrial sectors. We've seen the project that Arena supporting between Sydney Water and Gemina here in Sydney, where the mere announcement of that project has triggered significant interest in the purchasing of the gas from, or the biomethane from that project. So allowing the development of market mechanisms is expected to then underpin future project growth. And as I said, this will provide this provides a pathway to market for a methane product into an established pipeline network that, as I said, with the establishment of a relevant mechanism, and obviously the Clean Energy Regulator is very keen on this. This pathway will then unlock more project opportunities. So jumping to theme 2, so application of bioenergy for road transport. So this from our point of view is a very real near-term opportunity. And again, important to flag that first bullet point there is ensuring the activity is complementary with hydrogen and electric vehicle opportunities. In particular, heavier road transport, where these new technologies may play a role is still very much undecided. But the benefit that biofuels, and in particular renewable diesel, which is focused on within the roadmap itself, has the benefit of being able to utilize existing infrastructure, and in a lot of cases, the existing vehicles have limited to no modification requirements to allow that to work. And where we do see a real benefit of that is providing a very near-term emission reduction benefit that then supports a mature state application in the future, where there will be an ongoing need for renewable diesel, but again, complementary to electric vehicle opportunities and hydrogen opportunities. So again, theme 2, so an opportunity around renewable electricity. So I'm sure a lot of people are aware, but at present, bioenergy actually makes a very, very significant portion of total renewable electricity generation in Australia at the moment. And a lot of people think that that's predominantly solar and wind, which does play a big part and is playing an increasing part, but acknowledging the role that, for example, the big gas generators play in Queensland and New South Wales, though, is that word dispatch. Bioenergy for electricity is dispatchable technology. Important to flag, we don't want this competing with extremely low cost renewables. So I think middle of the day, when rooftop solar and large scale solar is all generating and providing oversupply of electricity, how do we take the smart route and ensure that renewable electricity from bioenergy sources is actually supporting times when it's needed, including providing relevant system services. So on to theme number 3 of the 4 themes, and this is really around understanding what that total potential market looks like. And this is one of the areas that we did flag, or the report has flagged, where there would be additional future work to be done to understand the opportunity. One of the common themes through the consultation process was what was people's views around what the total addressable market size was from bioenergy. And we got a very wide range of views, some of them quite optimistic, some of them less so, but definitely flagged with a divergence of views, the opportunity to, I suppose, provide a consensus view. I think also important to acknowledge the great work that the AREMI and ABBA platform has provided in this space. And if anything, it's probably moving that to the next level so that people can then make the next level of investment decisions around projects and offtake, etc., that allow that to that allows the sector to move forward, and even picking up new opportunities around agricultural sectors that might not necessarily show up on those platforms. But how do we actually incentivize the establishment of an understanding of that resource to underpin future opportunities? So the fourth theme, which I think ties very closely to the previous one, is in effect building up sector knowledge and sector understanding so that it can then leverage whatever resource they might have, whether it be commercial, financial, technical, feedstock, etc., to allow sectors to develop. So how can we actually bring together these range of people that supports project development? How do we raise awareness and social license around bioenergy and what the opportunity looks like? And in general, ensure that government and industry are well aligned moving forward. So this theme obviously would play very strongly to the work that Bioenergy Australia has done in the past and would be expected to do in the future. So just on the concluding slide, and this is actually very much lifted from the report. So don't worry about trying to write this down. It's all within there. But where do we see sort of the immediate activities off the back of the roadmap? So the first one is ARENA was very welcoming of the minister's announcement around an additional envelope of funding that ARENA would deliver to support the bioenergy sector through funding additional RD&D or research and development and deployment of advanced sustainable aviation and marine biofuel. So people that are familiar with ARENA will see we've delivered initiatives like this before, an example being how we deliver future fuels. So in essence, this is where there's a policy initiative that the government develops and looks to use ARENA's resources, expertise, and investment pathways to support what are usually quite complex sectors. So we anticipate we will come to market early in the new year with some consultation around this before then deciding and launching a program that would deliver that. So stay tuned for that one into the new year. The second one is, which is underway at the moment, it has received a lot of interest, is the harmonisation of the natural gas laws to allow or bring or remove impediments around biomethane and hydrogen application within the natural gas network. So that's ongoing. The Emission Reduction Fund is obviously developing and in the process of its new biomethane methodology, which the clean energy regulator is running, and that's getting a lot of industry buy-in from what I've observed. Fuel standards review is continuing and ongoing, which again will be very relevant, particularly in the case of renewable diesel. Also the last one is we anticipate through another policy initiative we're delivering the microgrid studies program, where there are a number of bioenergy applications in there as well. So I'll conclude there, and just in terms of the pathway forward, and I'm sure Shahana will speak to it shortly, but at the upcoming Bioenergy Australia event, I think that's planned for early in the new year, we anticipate having a more deep dive into this document, where we'll ask ENIA and Deloitte to share their views and their expertise around whether it be the economic modelling or the technology elements. So please stay tuned for more updates as well.
Thanks, Matt. That was brilliant. Yes, and I suppose a little tidbit, we will be coming out with the national conference dates and information early next week, but it is planned to take place in Canberra on the 15th and 16th of February, the 16th of February being the full day conference, and the day prior will be membership engagement with members of parliament and senators. Now, before we go to questions, and it's great that I can already see some questions popping up, we have Azaria will be speaking next, and she is, so Azaria Dobson, who is the Director of Activation, Precincts and Partnerships, Regional Growth New South Wales Development Corporation, who are partners with us on the development of this event, and as I said earlier, have been huge supporters in terms of trying to help us get some bioenergy projects across these special activation precincts. So I will now hand over to Azaria, and then we will do Q&A with the two after this. So over to you, Azaria, if you want to share your screen.
Great, thanks, Shahana. See if I can get this working. Do I share my entire screen?
Yeah, if you share your entire screen, and then you can just select the one that you want to.
Can you see my presentation?
I can, yeah.
Aha, winning.
Perfect. Well done.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much for the introduction. So as Shahana said, I'm from the Regional Growth New South Wales Development Corporation, and today in the 10 minutes I think that I've got to speak, I'm going to talk to you quickly about our program so you have a little bit of an idea about what we do and what our goals are. What we've learnt about bioenergy projects in this development phase, a lot of really interesting things that Matt just said. You know, we're grappling with those issues right now, and some of our future plans. So our vision, we're all about the regions. We're located in the regions. We are here for the long term, setting up a development corporation and a program that's a once in a generation program, and really trying to get, you know, economic prosperity for our regions. And we do have a great little team, which is good. So when we talk about special activation precincts, I mean, precincts seem to be the buzzword right now. It's kind of like intermodals were for a while. Everyone wants a precinct. Our precincts are like special economic zones. So they're where the government has decided to do something special, set aside a piece of land and then apply a different approach to that area. So in the majority of our precincts, we're talking about large scale industrial precincts, but they're very different to just your normal industrial estate. So Parks is our favourite precinct. I'm going to talk to you about Parks because this was actually supposed to be an in-person event in Parks, and we tried really hard with the Bioenergy Australia team to get everyone out there in person, but we just couldn't make it this year. But Parks was our very first activation precinct, but we do have some others. So we have precincts along the inland rails, so Moree, Wagga, Snowy Mountains, Williamtown and Narrabri are all the precincts. They've each got a different value proposition, and they're an area in regional New South Wales that we think has potential, and that if we put some investment behind it, then we can get that economic opportunity and jobs growth going. So we have access under our program to the Snowy Hydro Legacy Fund, so the $4.2 billion fund for the regions, and our activation precincts have access to a little over $1 billion. So the government's really committing to making these precincts a success in the longer term. Now, when we're talking about economic opportunities and jobs growth, the first thing that we did was we looked at what the biggest barrier to investment in New South Wales was. Now, I'm previously a planner in another life. Planning was identified as a very big barrier to people setting up. So, you know, why not just go to Queensland? It's much easier to set up. So we sort of set about doing a whole lot of studies. In Parks, for example, we set aside the time to do a master plan, do all of the technical studies required so that we could provide a streamlined planning approval process. So it's not about cutting corners, it's actually about us doing the work up front, making sure that we understand everything about the precinct and that we can deliver a product. And that streamlined planning is supported. We now have our own state environmental planning policy. For those of you who are planning fans, you can go and have a look at it. And what that actually enables us to do is welcome developers when they've actually got all of their documentation ready to go. On the strength of our strategic work and all of the technical studies and work with the other agencies that we've been doing over the last couple of years, we can actually provide a 30-day planning approval, which is unheard of before. So that's kind of a very special thing that we've been able to do. Because we're a development corporation, we're also able to own and develop land. So we take an interest in the precinct. So when I talked about that generational investment, the Development Corp is going to be there for the next 30 or 40 years, owning land, investing subsequent profits into the precinct and developing it over time. So it's not a typical government project that we kind of come and build something and then we go on to the next thing. We're actually there helping to make sure that we're going to achieve the objectives that we've set for ourselves. We're spending the government investment also on infrastructure. So in the example of Parks, we are going to spend $185 million on enabling works and getting the precinct out of the ground. So we're talking about roads, bridges, all of the services necessary to get that land ready for development. And the last thing that makes our precinct special is our concierge service. So welcoming investors and sort of saying, well, look, you've got access to the streamlined planning, but how else can we help you to get the result that we're looking for, which is new industries and jobs in the regions. So as I said, we're going to talk a bit about parks. I do encourage you to get out there if you can and have a look at the scale. We really see this precinct being the catalyst event is really the national logistics hub and its unparalleled connectivity. You just can't beat it in terms of its freight and logistics connections. So here's our master plan. So it looks nice on a page, but don't let that fool you. This is actually a 4,800 hectare precinct. So we're talking quite large areas of land, you know, that 40-year vision. We've planned for all of the different land uses that we think are going to be suitable for parks. So, you know, we've done all of our research and this is what we've come up with. By far and away, the most interest we've had is in the recycling and recovery and that precinct there, really around that waste and, you know, circular economy. So, you know, we've been bowled over with investors looking to start. We're still at the early stage of our infrastructure construction. So, you know, it's taking us a while to get that out of the ground, but we're on our way now. And we've got planning for a whole lot of other uses in the long term. Now, because we did the master plan, we've been able to actually embed sustainability and circular economy right in that planning phase. So, you know, really where from an energy perspective, a water perspective, we've done that as part of our precinct infrastructure. We're requiring our businesses to consider that when they come and set up. We're able to actually use our planning powers to make sure we've got businesses located next to other businesses where there can be circular economy opportunities and energy sharing. And we've got a goal to be the first UNIDO eco-industrial park. So those principles of industrial ecology seem really simple, but you need to actually have all of the parts of the framework in place to make it a reality. So we've set that up from the start, and we're looking to have accreditation. So from an infrastructure perspective, a building perspective, and then also across the whole precinct over time. As I said, this is kind of the precinct that we've had the most interest in. And, you know, there's been a whole lot of policy changes, a whole lot of businesses that are looking to come and set up and make use of waste as a resource. So we're hoping to see and hoping to announce a whole lot of people coming to this sub-precinct in the future. Now, it is mostly a greenfield site, but we do have existing businesses. So we've got Pacific National Intermodal, SET Logistics, which is also an intermodal business. We have a nationally significant pet food manufacturer, which we're also hoping to announce at some stage, and West Lyme and a solar farm. But really our focus for that longer term is on those new industries that we're bringing to the region for the first time. So that recycling, the advanced manufacturing, you know, Parks is really located in Australia's first critical minerals hub, which has just been announced. So that's going to be the equivalent of what the Hunter Valley is to the coal mining industry. The Central West will be the equivalent for that for critical minerals going forward. And Park SAP is going to play an enormous role in that development over time. And then, of course, renewable energy. So on to the energy side of things, talking to all of the businesses, there's been a really clear line in the sand. The first thing that they ask us is how much energy is available, how cheap is it, and can I get it behind the meter? We've had a whole lot of businesses ask for, you know, over 100 megawatts of behind the meter electricity. Now we don't have that just sitting around waiting. And so it's really, you know, for us, we need to match that supply and demand at the right time to get people across the line. Honestly, the sustainability credentials is the second thing that they ask for. The businesses know that their customers are demanding this, the overseas export markets are demanding it, and you know they've actually got to be able to prove up those credentials. So I think the tide is really starting to turn where it's becoming business as usual rather than, you know, just the top people wanting to do that sort of thing. Now, obviously something that we have focused on and that we continue to work on is a clear approval pathway for particularly bioenergy projects and support for new and innovative technologies. So we're working very closely with our cousins in EPA, as part of the DPI planning team as well, to make sure that when we do have investors and people coming to us with project ideas, that we can provide them a pathway that does actually, get them to that end result. And, it has been tough in the past. We think that we've got a pretty good approach at the moment, and we know that there's a bit more work to do. But what we don't want to do is to be saying to people, you're doing something innovative, but we can't really have you here. You need to go and prove that up overseas before you can, do that in New South Wales. We want the innovation to stay in the state and in the country. So the key commercial considerations when we're discussing these bioenergy projects, and I know it was in the roadmap and Matt talked about it before, is obviously the security of supply. It definitely seems like it's there, but people are asking us, well, how secure is it and how do we get it, to you guys in the precinct? Now, as I said, Parkes is very well connected. I would sort of think it probably lends itself to maybe a bioenergy hub. Aggregating the waste and being able to do things makes a whole lot of sense. As Matt has alluded to in that area, that cooperation kind of means that maybe the projects might get across the line. I think when we're talking, though, about risk allocation, we as government, in our section of government anyway, have been pretty clear that it's really hard for us to guarantee things like feedstock and PPA security. We are looking to address that issue of risk allocation by addressing the things that we can actually control, being things like the infrastructure and the planning pathways, and hopefully de-risking the investment that way. So our main lessons learned, what's been easy, setting the vision for renewable energy and circular economy has been very easy. I think the time is now for all of those things to be happening in it, and we couldn't be doing it at a better time. Finding bioenergy champions. Honestly, Shahana and Bioenergy Australia and the team, they are the most dedicated industry group that we deal with, and they absolutely hit it out of the park all of the time. And I think they do really need to be called out for that, because, it's easy to support an entity that's so engaged and that wants things to work out so well. For us, because we've got a lot of land in Parkes, setting aside land for shared services and the movement of energy, if we're creating that bit of that hub approach is easy because we have a lot of land. And identifying potential opportunities for regional circularity, it's easy because there's so many out there. But what we found is hard, and I think Matt did point out this before, is the feasibility still being questioned. So we might know that we've got a lot, but is it actually feasible to get it there, to use it? Is the shared infrastructure that's necessary to set up those connections between businesses or at a precinct scale, is that cost actually going to mean that the project's not feasible? For us also, at our very early stage of development, having limited anchor businesses at the start is hard because we can't guarantee that offtake. We've got plenty of people talking about projects, but until we've got the off-takers there, it's a bit of chicken and egg and they don't want to come and set up. The large area also, because we've got so much land, is a bit of a problem when we're talking about things like heat and steam, because if they've got to travel, 8 kilometres from one side of the precinct to another, sometimes that becomes a little bit of a challenge. And as I've alluded to before, policy uncertainty, which I think is something that we can provide some help on. So we think the cooperation is the key to achieving our energy vision. So we need to make connections with the right people. We need to be supportive in the area where we can play a role, like clear policy and regulatory environment. We need to de-risk the projects as much as possible to encourage investment. And we need to ensure that community is part of the process, because without community, there is no social license and we won't get these projects off the ground. So our next steps, we've been busy with the master plan, we have our legislation, we've done all of our engineering design, and our infrastructure guys are actually out there right now starting construction. So very exciting time for us, but we are looking to welcome actual projects coming on the ground next year and the year after. And that's all from me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Azaria. Fantastic to see where everything is heading with Parkes, and I can't wait to hear some announcements of some bioenergy projects that will be a part of that precinct, hopefully. Now we will open it up to Q&A. So if anybody has any questions of Azaria or Matt, please feel free to raise your hand or to pop something into the chat over on the side. We have about 15 minutes allocated, so plenty of time for you to drill either of them on questions. I might just kick off Azaria, I suppose, just in terms of, and you have the audience here now in terms of all of the project developers, fuel producers and the like that are watching now or will be watching later. What's your call to action for them? Where are you at in terms of wanting their engagement moving forward?
I think that's the hard one, is that, we're really keen to talk to people. And I know there's some people on the call that we have actually spoken to, but where we've really stalled, I suppose, is, I guess, that feasibility phase. So everyone knows that it's a good idea and that it's a no-brainer, but that feasibility of actually, carting material and making that work has kind of been a little bit of a barrier. And for us, to be honest, we've taken a little longer in, getting our program across the line. So, I'm hoping that now we've got people on site, we've kind of overcome those issues during this last COVID period. But yeah, I definitely think there's a bit of a role for some more discovery so that we can, share that data and have more people involved in being able to kind of bring their technology and their smarts into the precinct.
And there might be, being a little bit cheeky, but there might be something between kind of ARENA's funding in relation to R&D and that in relation to the sustainable aviation fuel and renewable diesel, and how that potentially could be linking in with looking at feasibility of projects in the SAPs as well, potentially. For our members that might be thinking about, well, are there any funding streams available to look at that? Matt, is that where are you sort of heading? Don't want you to be, obviously you don't know yet, but what are your thoughts in relation to that 33 million?
Yeah, it's a good question, Shahana. And obviously having the direction around the aviation and marine angles, adds a degree of clarity. And for people that aren't familiar, ARENA does from time to time get requested by government to deliver these policy initiatives, and typically they're framed as new policy proposals. And what happens there is it's incremental to ARENA's existing funding, and then ARENA's requested within certain bounds and guidelines. In this case, for example, research, development and deployment within a certain sector. So yeah, as I said, Shahana, we will definitely come to market next year seeking some industry views and consultation on those spaces. We've actually had a few people reach out to us already, but obviously have just needed to
not surprised
to just temper that back a bit, because even us ourselves, we need to see that material so that we can then frame the questions that we need industry assistance with.
Yeah, great. We have had a couple of questions. So Sarah, and I don't know, Matt, if you'll be the best one to answer this, but she's asked if what kind of barriers are expected to be removed under national gas law review? Is that something you're able to talk to, or not really?
Yeah, it's not something I'm too close to, Shahana, but what I have observed is that it's really around a harmonisation of the definition of natural gas and naturally occurring. And there's a whole range of parameters. It's actually, what I've observed is it's quite a legal focused issue rather than a practical one or a technical one. So what my understanding is that process is doing is looking to harmonise that definition so that things like biomethane and hydrogen, which don't necessarily meet the definition of natural gas, will in some instances be captured within that definition, so that when they're injected into the pipelines, they meet the definition of the specification of the gas that's required.
Great, just removing barriers, that's what we're all about. And we do have a question here from Emmanuel that is directed to you, Azaria, and that is, what sort of distance would you be considering for the biomass to be coming from, like outside of the precinct range? Have you identified what sort of a wider zone?
It really depends on the technology and the detail. So we have projects that probably fit more of an energy from waste definition than a bioenergy definition, and they're looking at taking the waste from as far afield as Sydney. So it's the devil's in the detail, and I think that's the challenge, is that when you do get into the detail, there's a lot more questions that you need to have answered. But I think from a purely bioenergy perspective, the Central West is full of bioenergy resources, so you wouldn't actually have to take it too far. The only challenge with that is that with parks really the strength of its connectivity is based on rail. So then you're back to a road freight, opportunity, and that kind of, looks a little bit different.
Yeah, great. And we've had a little comment here from Judy saying thanks for the presentations, and that she's going to reach out to you, Azaria, on how the local jobs programs can support the Parks Precinct project. So that's great.
Great, thank you.
And I suppose another question from me, but Azaria, this is another, me being slightly cheeky, but crystal balling into the future, you have all of these special activation precincts. I can imagine in your head, you've got a bit of a vibe in terms of what you think, if that's going to play out. Do you see a bright future for bioenergy across the special activation precincts?
Absolutely. So, I'm an environmental scientist, but I'm new to energy, but the energy opportunities with bioenergy are just amazing. So, when we're talking to people about all the different types of technology and what could be possible, I see a bright future as part of our energy mix in most of our precincts. Snowy Mountains, maybe not so much. Williamtown, depending on the uses, but all of the others, especially the inland rail, locations. To me, it's actually, in somewhere like Moree, where there is currently no natural gas supply, bioenergy will be, one of the main sources of renewables. And we've got a lot of first movers that are coming to set up. They're negotiating contracts at the moment, and part of their contracts actually stipulate renewable energy. So they're sort of saying to us, look, we'll wait for you. We'll access the grid in the meantime, but for our long-term sustainability, we need to have a renewable solution. They're looking to bioenergy for that. Now, in our precincts, we're looking to have a mix of projects, including hydrogen. We're looking to support things like gas injection, but straight bioenergy projects that can meet the needs of the precinct, absolutely. So I'm hoping that next year that we will actually be going out to market for a few projects and driving some projects ourselves. So not just kind of being the recipients of people that are sort of interested. We'll actually be going to market and saying, well, we have an opportunity. We'd like you to participate. Similar to Matt's kind of, we'll probably do a bit of a market sounding first to make sure that we come out with something that's at least semi-coherent to the market that the people can respond to. But, honestly, without bioenergy, some of our precincts are going to struggle to meet those green credentials that we've set for ourselves. So yes, definitely.
Yeah, great. We've got a question here from Peter Knight, which is in relation to how would credits for carbon savings tie in with the bioenergy projects? Azaria, did you want to talk to that at all?
Yeah, so part of what we've set a whole lot of objectives for our precincts. One of them is to try and be carbon neutral over time. So that's really, it's a challenge when you're developing a precinct. We're just like a developing nation trying to meet, carbon emissions targets. Part of what we would want to be doing is, having people come to the precinct that can actually purchase credits or access that sort of a system to be able to demonstrate that, rather than purchasing offsets, if they're actually purchasing green energy from somewhere, and whether it's, green gas out of the grid, and there's a really good certificate system that comes along with that. I know that the gas industry is looking at that. I think Josh is on the line. So look, I think we're super supportive of that, because I know that part of what we're doing, and this is the whole key with us being here for the longer term, we can't just come in and make a whole lot of statements and then not actually deliver. So I think once we're sort of through what is a very storming kind of a time trying to get our legislation and infrastructure built, we'll move more to the accreditation and those sort of governance systems so that we can demonstrate assurance and our ESG credentials. So Pete, I definitely think that will be a key part of that.
And I think also, adding to that, and Matt mentioned it, the development of the biomethane method as part of the emissions reduction fund. We've also been working with the New South Wales Government Circular Economy team around an incentivisation scheme for biogas. So I think, there's going to be so many different layers of a policy that, that were not present 4 years ago that will hopefully be really sort of tipping some of these projects over and looking at some of the work we're doing around digestate and how we can have that normalised as part of the system as well, particularly relating to biogas. One question that, and since joining Bioenergy Australia, particularly in New South Wales, the constant challenge that our project developers have faced has been the EPA. And it was interesting to hear you sort of mention before that, working with our cousins, the EPA, which is great. It would be really good, I suppose, for particularly the project developers on the call to understand how are you doing that? Like, how are you overcoming some of those really, I hate to say it, but ridiculous kind of backwards thinking around some of these projects that has prevented things progressing that make perfect sense in a normal world?
So I think the benefit of the Activation Precincts program is that we're trying to do something different. So sometimes that kind of is very collaborative and we work hand in hand, and then other times we're kind of pushing people. And I think over the last couple of years, we've been in various roles, all of our government agencies, because we work with everybody, including the EPA, and everyone's played a different role. And eventually we've gotten to, who would have thought that we could turn off state significant development and that we wouldn't need to do a state significant application anymore. Like, the things that we've achieved have been quite amazing, but it's been really hard to get there. I can't fault EPA at the moment for their willingness to come to the table and discuss these things. So I think that the 20-year waste strategy is definitely been a turning point for EPA. So the executives that I'm personally engaging with, they've been very receptive to the things that we've been talking about. There's references in their own documentation to things like innovation sandboxes and taking a new approach and reviewing some of the things that have been definitely problematic. I can't guarantee where we're going to get to, and I think that we can't kind of all gather around and persecute EPA. If they're coming to the table and being collaborative, then I actually think we're going to get there together. It's just, I don't think it's going to be very easy, but like I said, I can't fault them in terms of cooperation at the moment, just going through those things. So I think probably, Shahana, for all of the people on the call, being really clear about what the problem has been. So I know that we've been reviewing legislation with EPA, and it's this bit in this section, and because you're interpreting it this way, this is what the problem is. That's really hard to argue with, rather than just you're all really difficult and we're going to go and set up in Queensland or whatever. So I think that collecting those examples from the members when we can, I think will be a very key part of that.
Yeah, fantastic. And look, just one final question, Matt, and it's probably a bit of a doozy for you, but we now have the Bioenergy Roadmap. It was something Bioenergy Australia advocated for in the lead up to the last federal election, and we now have it. And we're sort of on the brink of another federal election. I guess I'm interested to hear from you if you feel that, the work that you've been doing on the Bioenergy Roadmap over the last couple of years and the engagement you've had with the government, if you get a sense that there's a turning point in terms of bioenergy with the government, and if you feel like, there is a brighter future kind of coming, and this isn't going to be a kind of left on the shelf roadmap that isn't going to be informing policy into the future. It would be good to kind of hear your thoughts as much as you can give.
Yeah, it's a great question, Shahana. I would expect nothing less from you as well. So thank you very much. I mean, maybe the way I will couch it would be is I've been amazed since we've completed this work that the levels of briefings that's been requested on it, that's within federal departments, ministerial level as well, and including, importantly, state governments as well. They've all asked to sit down, understand what it means and what they can do and how it can all align. So I think in terms of sort of being informed, Shahana, I think this is sort of a really sort of telling point from that point of view. The roadmap was definitely designed and intended to bring everyone together. It wasn't designed to say this is all industry's job or it's all government's job or it's all regulation. It was designed to say here's a framework and a vision that everyone can support and buy into. So it's exactly the tool that's needed. So I mean, if anything, I'd say to you and your members as well, continue the great work you're doing and making sure you're holding up this document and using it as the discussion point with key stakeholders, again, whether that's government or regulators or local members or whatever it might be. It's got everything in there to bring everyone together.
Yeah, and I mean, I would add to that, we've certainly, even just recently hearing, being given a copy of the recent defence call for consultants in relation to future fuel strategy for the Department of Defence in relation to their domestic fuel use, which, you know, 70% of Australia's defence fuel that is used is aviation fuel. So it's great to see that they're now looking at, you know, alternative streams of fuel to be able to support that, but also even just recently giving a briefing to Australia's construction industry, and I think we had over 20 of Australia's largest construction firms participating in this briefing, which was around how they can be looking at biofuels in decarbonisation. So I mean, definitely from our perspective, we're being slammed, which is great, and we're obviously seeking to capitalise on every possible opportunity, but it's good to hear that that's the same within ARENA, and really looking forward to, you know, how this all looks in 5 years' time, and we can look back and go, look, we actually did it. I can't wait. So I'm excited for that. Well, look, we don't have any further questions, so we might wrap up this session. Thank you so much to Matt and Azaria for presenting in this session. I think it was a great scene setter for the rest of the day.